Good evening, everybody. It is the Safety and a Sportswriter show with Knoxville, Nate, and Big Joe. As we get back to after taking a little break, we have a lot to get to tonight. Basically, we are going to be talking about money, and how money is ruining sports, and getting to a few other things that are going on as we try and get to the bottom of how we're going to be able to survive with all this money they're throwing at athletes right and left, whether it be golf, whether it be college football, whether it be the NBA and all the craziness going on. Plus, maybe some other good time stories we can get to. Nate, how you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. Yeah, you know me. I love sports pretty much more than anyone, but even I am kind of getting disgusted. I mean, I have to drop $100 to put gas in my tank every day, and struggle to feed my little family. Meanwhile, what's his name, Anthony Simmons, is getting paid $25 million a year to play basketball. I
It's
just it's making me sick. I'm sorry. I love sports and I've always enjoyed it as an escape, but it's hard when the gap just keeps increasing between what regular human beings like myself make from working my ass off 6-7 days a week compared to these guys that play what 2 games a week for half the year, and it's just ridiculous. It's one thing if LeBron gets paid, $100 million or whatever it is he makes. I mean, the guy is unbelievable, one of the greatest players of all time. But when Anthony Simmons makes $25 million, it's disgusting.
well, that's the thing. When Michael was dominating the NBA, he was the only one making the money in that stratosphere. Even Hall of Fame players like Barkley and Pippen and Carl Malone and Stockton and those guys couldn't come within 20 million of what Michael was making. And now you have average players and fading players. I mean, the five guards I want to really focus in on, the guys that are driving me crazy are what went on with John Wall, Kyrie Irving, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Ben Simmons. What's going on with these five players is a great example of why the NBA is just out of control. When John Wall, who hasn't had played a complete season since 2015 and sat out this past year and sat out 2 years ago, can decide for himself that he's re-upping his contract for $40 million. When Kyrie Irving goes back to the Nets for 37 million because nobody offered him in their league was going to offer him that kind of money or anywhere near it. And I mean, then you look at Russell Westbrook, a fading superstar who's really an anchor on LA, and Ben Simmons, who may not play again. I mean, and we don't know if it's Ben Simmons' mind or back or what, or a little bit of both. We don't know anything what's really going on with this guy, and yet these guys decided for themselves this is what they're worth.
Yeah, I mean it's gotten a little bit disgusting when there's like 10 guys that make $40 million or more per year.
Yeah,
Steph Curry making 48 million. I mean, that's disgusting. But the guy,
has the rings.
he wins championships, and he's one of, as much as I don't like him, he's one of the greatest players of all time. Russell Westbrook got traded to the Lakers and immediately made them worse. I mean, you're talking about a team that won the title in 2020, and then in 2022, they don't even make the playoffs because they have Russell Westbrook, and he's going to get $47 million and may not even play a ton next year if they're able to get somebody else. I mean, it's pretty disgusting. And my biggest thing is the Nets. I mean, the Nets are the perfect example of what's wrong with the NBA. I mean, think about this. Kevin Durant wants to prove that he's a guy that can lead teams to a championship. He was on the Oklahoma City Thunder, couldn't get it done, leaves them. He's the one that chokes away, essentially by himself, a 3-1 lead over the Warriors. And instead of coming back the following year and leading the Thunder to overtake them, he jumps ship and joins the Warriors team to win a couple titles of his own. And then when he takes heat for it, he says, well, I'll go to Brooklyn and I'll win titles there and show everyone. Well, we've all seen how that's worked out. He can blame the other two guys with him, but this was his idea, and he handpicked these guys, and it's been an utter failure. And instead of sitting there and trying to make it work out, now he wants to be traded, and he wants out of Brooklyn. Well, I looked at his list today of the teams that he wants to go to. Well, he wants to go to all the teams that are already ready to win the title. He wants to go to the Suns. I'm like, give me a break.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to Steph Curry, like him, hate him, whatever. Before he arrived at Golden State, barely anybody outside of an NBA fan knew that the Golden State Warriors existed for 3 decades. So from the 70s, they were one of the doormat. Well, there was that time in the mid 80s to late the early 90s when they had Mullins and Hardaway and I'm trying to think of the other guy they had, but they had 3 really good players and they were at least a competitive team. But from the mid 90s, when Chris Mullins left and when Tim Hardaway left, and they weren't a competitive team for 15 years. Then all of a sudden, Curry shows up, and now how much Golden State gear do you see people wearing around? How many fans have jumped on that bandwagon and things like that? So he's worked that money. Same thing with LeBron with Cleveland. Same thing Michael did in Chicago. That you understand those contracts. But Westbrook and Wall and Kyrie, no one jumped on the bandwagon of a team to root for them. No one does. And then like you say before we came in here, Bradley Beal, who has been hinting how he wants to play for championships and he doesn't want to play for Washington, re-signs with them for $50 million a year on a team that is so far away from being competitive. And with his contract is going to be anchored. How does what he say make any sense in anybody's mind?
I don't know. I mean, when I saw that, I really couldn't believe it. I mean, this guy's made a ton of money already, and done not much. I mean, he's a good player. He scores a lot of points, but it hasn't led to much. And so I figured, he's probably going to go out west and join the Lakers, because that's where I've heard, a potential landing spot for him. But instead of doing that, he re-signs with the Washington Wizards, 5 years, $251 million Supermax contract. So he's going to get $50 million a year, Bradley Beal is, to go and finish 10th in the East. I mean, I don't understand. They're not going to have enough money to even go out and sign anybody else. So why do this? I don't understand why Washington would do this, and I don't understand why he is doing this. It makes no sense to me.
It's just the money doesn't even exist in this world anymore. I don't care if you're talking about a CEO. I don't care if you're talking about a major sports star. I don't care if you're talking about a rock star, a movie star. The money these guys make does not exist in this world. It's just a ledger sheet. So I think that's why these owners don't even think about it, because in long last, the money never comes out of their account. Really, it just goes back and forth between the accounts they own. But I mean, it's just where did we get the payback, and where does a fan get a payback? Where can a fan? They don't even associate with us anymore. They don't make any sense. I mean, I understand they have great talent, and I'm not saying it should go back to where they have to get off-season jobs like it was in the 50s and 60s, or that. But I mean, the kind of money they're making now. I mean, how can you be hungry? How could you really care about what you're doing? Why would you get up and go to the gym every day? Why would you work on you? Look at Ben Simmons. He still doesn't have a jump shot. He's been in the league almost 10 years.
Yeah, he's not gonna get one at this point, I don't think. And let's talk a little bit about the Washington roster. They picked up Will Barton and Monty Morris. So now their starting 5 is Kristaps Porzingis, Kyle Kuzma, Will Barton, Bradley Beal, and Johnny Davis, who's a rookie. So how is that team going to compete in the East? I mean, they're not.
No. They would be better off let Beal leave and try and get somebody to run with Davis, who's a pretty good player at Wisconsin. I mean, he was a pretty decent player. I don't think he's ever going to be, an all-time superstar. But I mean, you think about it. Let's go back to a team you just talked about. When the Nets, the year before they got Durant and Kyrie Irving, when Kenny Atchison was coaching, and that team of overachievers, they were much closer to competing for an NBA championship than they are now.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I just don't understand what they're doing with this. I mean, Bradley Beal, as I mentioned, is a guy that, is a pretty decent basketball player. He's a guy that can score points. Is he a guy that can lead a team to a championship? Definitely not. There's no way. And last year wasn't even his best year. I mean, if you go back to 2020, 2021, that was the year that he really, excelled, and he averaged over 31 points a game and had himself a really good season. But last year in 2021, 2022, he only played in 40 games.
Right.
And he averaged 23 points a game. So the games he did play in, he didn't do very well. And he missed half the season. Instead of making him earn something back, or like I said, I thought he would go to, LA and maybe try and help them win a title. You reward that guy from having a season where he missed half the year and he didn't do very well in the games he played in with $251 million, $50 million a year. What are the other players going to get if this guy gets $50 million? How much is Kevin Durant going to get? How much are these other guys going to get? I that's my question.
Well, that's another thing. Not to put Michael on a pedestal. I used to love the fact that he re-upped his contract. He never got a long-term contract. He just re-upped it every year. And, every year he won a championship, so they had to re-sign him and give him more money.
Yeah.
So it's like, at least he earned it that way. I mean, it's just it just makes you want to vomit. It does. I mean, it's like, because none of these guys, at the end of next year, I defy to think any of them will be hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. It's not going to be them. It's going to be Golden State again. It's going to be the Celtics again. I mean, you look at. I mean, before they went out and got Bradley Beal, all Washington had to do was look at what Chicago did this year to make themselves competitive in Cleveland, without having to go and spend max money on a guy that you already know can't move the dial and move you into the realm of being a competitive team in the Eastern Division or Eastern Conference. So,
well, the Wizards finished 12th last year. They were behind the Knicks. They were 35-47. And yes, as I mentioned, he missed some games, but I mean, I don't understand. They're so far back in the East, not to mention the entire NBA. They're so far back in the East that I would think at this point, try and do what Cleveland did. I mean, Cleveland had themselves a phenomenal year. And if it weren't for injuries, we could have talked about Cleveland making a real run at it. And, I feel bad for them because they were so decimated by injuries that they kind of limped in to the end of the season. But give that franchise a lot of credit because what they were doing before they got hurt was pretty amazing. I mean, they had young guys like Darius Garland, who they drafted and developed out of Vanderbilt. Guys like Evan Mobley, who competed for Rookie of the Year. Another guy, Colin Sexton, who they drafted and have developed and really was playing well till he got injured. That's the model that I would go for instead of giving Bradley Beal $50 million a year. I just can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, get your starting five together or starting four together, and then bring in your superstar as the final piece. I was watching today where Carmelo Anthony they think is going to be playing still next year. I mean, here's a guy who should have retired 3 years ago. I mean, he's not the player he used to be at all. And where's he going to go? And then somebody says he's coming to the Nets. Oh, that'll be good. That'll be a good pick right there.
That's a perfect spot for him, honestly.
Well, yeah, the place where they keep. I don't know. They must be the dumbest fans in the world when they think they're really that close to winning a championship. But I mean, staying on this and going to someplace different. Let's go to a little bit to the college football realm. First of all, um, Arch Manning decides to go to Texas. What was your opinion on that? I think it was a terrible choice for him.
Yeah, I didn't like it either. To be honest, everybody's like, well, that it had nothing to do with money. Well, I kind of think it did. I mean, the two teams that have been shelling out the most cash from their collectives are Texas A&M and Texas, and they've been buying players left and right, and not even really hiding it. And should Arch Manning get some money? Sure, why not? That's kind of what this is for. But initially, this NIL setup was for the guys that were at the schools and helped these schools win games and brought fans, to the stadium and
Right.
eyes to the TV because they gave something to a program that ended up leading to cash being made. But that's not how it's being used.
No.
They're using it now to pay players to come to universities. And that's what this NIL is being used for. And it's completely not what it was intended for. And I think that's what happened here. I mean, why else would he go to Texas? I mean, because Steve Sarkisian, some great coach, give me a break. The guy drank himself into a stupor trying to win out in USC. And then he's going to, reinvent himself in Austin. And they go 5-7 and lose to Kansas last year. So don't sit here and tell me that he's going there because of Steve Sarkisian and his offense. I think that's not true. And plus, they already have their quarterback. They just paid $5 million to get Quinn Ewers to transfer from Ohio State. So are those guys going to compete now? Are they both going to stay there and one of them sit on the bench? I doubt that. So I didn't like the choice. I'm not sure why he would want to go to Texas. I mean, you want to go to a team that couldn't win more than 5 games in the Big 12 last year and couldn't beat the Kansas Jayhawks. That's not where I would go if I was the best player so-called in the 2023 class.
And the other thing is to flip the coin on what you started out talking about. Yeah, he doesn't need the money. His grandfather, his father, his 2 uncles, the kid's not hurting. Okay, what they talked about the licensing, they go about the kids, how much they had to give up to during their childhood, during their high school years, to keep themselves in shape, what they gave up to get in and pursue their quote unquote dreams of playing college football and then helping a team, become relevant or become competitive. Where's the payback for all the sacrifices they make? Yeah, there are some players that come out of bad situations, and college football is their only way to an education and hopefully a better life, if not the NFL. But the fact of the matter is Arch Manning is not that kid. Arch Manning's not a problem. That's like, if what's his name? If Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, when his son was the hot quarterback in Texas, if he got money from somebody, I mean, come on, that guy's got more money in it than I'll ever see in his bank account right now. Come on, that's just crazy. But I mean, watching Arch Manning sign with that team. I think when Chris Sims went down to Texas, and he was there when Mac Jones was there, and it didn't work out too well for him. So
he did some things, but I think this is a whole nother level, and I wasn't really sure like what attracted you to Texas. I mean, was it the tradition when they were good 10 years ago? I mean, hell, you could have gone to Tennessee if that was the case. I just don't understand. I mean, I really don't think they're as close as everybody else does from being back. And, as I mentioned, they already have a quarterback. So
I wanted to see him at Ole Miss. I thought that would have been follow his grandfather, follow his uncle. I think I don't know if his father's career was over before he could go to Ole Miss, right? His father went down in high school.
Well, he went to Ole Miss. He signed and committed to Ole Miss, and then it was actually the summer workouts where he started having problems, and then went to the Mayo Clinic and got checked out. I mean, and then his career was over.
That would have been like the better story, living out the father's dream when his father couldn't, and following his grandfather and his uncle
Well, and Ole Miss is close. Ole Miss
Yeah.
has a good coach who's proven that he can improve a program. He took FAU and did a good job there after taking his lumps at USC and Tennessee. He's learned from it. He's gotten better.
Right.
Then he went to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss had a tremendous year last year. He's
Right.
proven that he can develop quarterbacks.
Matt Corral is gone.
Matt Corral went to the NFL and has got a chance to start for the Panthers this year. So he's really proven that he can handle the position and proven that he can really create an offensive system to go along with the quarterback's attributes. And so if he would have signed with Ole Miss, I would have said, that makes a lot of sense to me. But Texas, I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I think it would have been it would have restored my faith that the traditions of college football aren't totally being torn down. And then, we talked before we came on the air, and I'll let you start out with it. UCLA and USC are now in the Midwest. They're no longer in California, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we figured that something was going to happen ever since we learned over a year ago that Texas and Oklahoma were leaving the Big 12 and joining the SEC. Well, the other conferences can't just sit back and let that happen and do nothing. I mean, the SEC is already recognized by everybody as the best conference. So the Big Ten has been, taking their time. And instead of just doing a knee-jerk reaction, they've thought about what would be best for them. And honestly, this is a great move for the Big Ten. And I know you don't like it, and a lot of people don't like it. But adding two teams, adding the Los Angeles market to the Big Ten is huge. Adding two teams that are actually, they're traditional powers. UCLA, since Chip Kelly's gotten there, has started to finally blossom into somewhat of the program we expected them to be with Chip Kelly. Last year, they didn't, exceed all expectations, but they did beat LSU. They did take some steps forward. They've got their fifth-year quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, coming back, and they signed a good recruiting class. And then you've got USC that hired the big-time coach in Lincoln Riley. They got their quarterback in Caleb Williams. They signed a tremendous recruiting class. They've gotten pretty much every transfer in the world. USC is destined to get better and compete. So this makes the Big Ten a lot better. And as I said, from a financial standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. They already added the Jersey market with Rutgers and the D.C. area with adding Maryland. They've gotten a lot of that money broadcasting games over in the East Coast, and now they're adding the Los Angeles market. So it's huge for the Big Ten Conference. And if they can finalize this deal and get those two teams, it's going to help the Big Ten Conference. And it's also going to help reshape college football because these mega conferences are really starting to take shape. And inevitably what the goal is, from what I've learned, is they're trying to break away from the NCAA, which I think would be a good idea.
Well, they have to. I mean, more to your point, they have to because it's ridiculous. They can't sell anymore 113 teams in a race for the national championship. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Like I've said many times, when Central Michigan Chippewas are playing in the final game, wake me up, please. Because, I mean, there's just the MAC teams can't compete anymore. There's so many. But the thing that bothers me is, like I said, I like Northwestern. I like Pat Fitzgerald. And 2 years ago, they came within, 18 minutes of upsetting a better Ohio State team and maybe winning the Big Ten championship. That's not going to happen anymore. In the traditional rivals, I used to like watching the USC and the USC Cal or UCLA Stanford, and those traditional rivalries are gone. I mean, the thing that they said that you grew up listening to, the pageantry, the legacy, the legends, all the rivalries, they don't exist anymore. It's just the money that came in, and you could trace it back to ESPN when these super kind of channels that threw all the money at these places, and it's college sports as a whole is suffering because of it, especially football, where the money is just astronomical. I mean,
well, it's definitely changing. I mean, you look at it now. the money that's being thrown around to these kids that are just coming out of high school that haven't even played in college football is astronomical, and the money that these teams are generating. I mean, think about it. Makes a lot of sense for USC and UCLA to join the Big Ten, because when Ohio State makes the college football playoff, every team in the Big Ten gets what, $13 million. So why does USC and UCLA want to stay out in the Pac-12 where no team ever makes the college football playoff and not get some of that money? They want to join a conference where they can get paid, and they want to have their own channel. They want the UCLA network and the USC network, and that's not going to happen in the Pac-10. So I understand why those teams are doing it. What's going to happen with college football, I really don't know. I've got to admit that I am concerned with college football as a whole, because that's my passion. That's what I love, is college football, and the landscape is changing. I mean, no more are guys committed to these universities. I mean, guys can transfer, go wherever they want. And I've always been a proponent of allowing a transfer, but now you can transfer as many times as you want. You can go wherever you want. It's going to be interesting to see if these teams can hold it together, and if if college football itself can survive all these changes, because things are happening very fast.
Well, and people, you're right. I mean, if you're going to be, if you're going to compete against Alabama, you got to find a way to get the money, you got to sell your soul to get in there and do it. But for me as a fan, like I said, I always loved it when a team, even though I grew up a Notre Dame fan, I loved it when a team came out of nowhere to do something and do something special and have that special year. Boston College with Doug Flutie. That team was talented. I mean, there were a lot of players on that team that went on to play in the pros. Some at a very high level, some that were really crazy, like a Bill Romanowski. But, Doug Flutie put BC and that football team on the map. In today's football, I don't know if he does. He can't compete with these guys.
Hey, you say that, but look at Cincinnati this year. I mean, Cincinnati came out of nowhere. Cincinnati is not a traditional power. Cincinnati wasn't playing in the SEC. They were on a very small conference. They have a minuscule budget compared to these other teams that they're competing against, and they made it all the way to the college football playoffs. So I agree with you that it's going to be difficult for these teams to make it. But at the same time, BYU has had a couple of decent years where they've come close, and here's Cincinnati, making it all the way to the Final Four and playing Alabama in the college football playoff. I thought that was very impressive, and I hope we see some more of that, because I thought it was exciting.
Yeah, but the one thing that worked in their favor was guys like Desmond Ridder staying with the program. Will he stay when he can get into the transfer portal and somebody in Ole Miss or Tennessee or USC or one of these teams, their quarterback is going early to the pros, and he can go right in there. They can plug him in and help that team compete at a higher level. I mean, that's the thing that Cincinnati, Northwestern, and those teams can't guard against. I agree with you that you see there's some good players on these teams, but they can't hang on to them because the bigger programs come along and scoop them.
Well, that's true, but Cincinnati now has joined the Big 12, and we talked about it a little bit off air. BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston have all joined the Big 12 conference. I think they're all starting to play no later than 2024, 2025. So, you think about that. Obviously, that conference took a hit with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, but if Cincinnati can keep playing as competitively as they have, if BYU can keep doing what they've been doing, if Houston can keep playing how they've been playing with Dana Horgerson as their coach, if the Gus bus and Gus Malzahn can reinvigorate some of his magic down at UCF, I think the Big 12 can survive this with Baylor and Dave Aranda and what he did down there. Iowa State and Matt Campbell's a good coach. Oklahoma State, and they almost made the national championship last year. You got TCU, West Virginia, They're going to have to probably get, I would think, Oregon and maybe Washington to join them to stay relevant. But I like what they're doing with the teams they added, and I'm hoping that the Big 12 can grab some of these Pac-12 teams and maybe Utah, maybe Washington, maybe Oregon, maybe all three of them, and create their own little power conference to compete with these other two.
Well, if they do, if it does eventually come where they break away, where the super conferences break away from the NCAA, I hope what they do is they realign everything again, get it back to where it used to be, where Oklahoma's playing Nebraska, and these states that butt up against each other, and these schools that are 50 miles apart and 100 miles apart are playing each other instead of hoping that Oregon, has to come across country to play Cincinnati or down to Houston or something. You know what I mean? There's something about those traditional rivalries. That's why I used to love Big East basketball, because if you're a Connecticut kid, you hated BC, you hated Providence, you hated St. John's, you hated Syracuse for a reason, because they're in your region. I love the regionalization that college sports used to be. And once these teams started moving around, jumping conferences, you lose that. You lose that sense of rivalry and pride, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of those rivalries are gone, and I'm sorry, but they're probably not coming back. And that affects me a little bit, because I used to love watching Oklahoma and Nebraska. But let's be honest, Nebraska sucks, and Oklahoma playing Nebraska wouldn't be fun to watch at this point. So maybe you still have USC and UCLA playing each other. They're going to the Big Ten. So you've still got that rivalry. You've still got that team up north and Ohio State playing each other. So some of these rivalries will exist. College football is just going to be a lot different. I mean, there's no doubt about it. These super conferences are going to exist. They're going to be formed. How it's all going to look, I'm not 100% sure. But like I said, the Pac-12, I think, is going to disband. And I just don't see them being able to draw teams to come in there. And as I mentioned, the Big 12 is already making moves. They already added those 4 teams, and I think they're going to look to add Oregon and Washington, potentially Utah and Colorado, maybe Boise State, San Diego State, some of those teams. They're going to have to do something and keep building to try and compete. But it's going to be – the next 2 years are going to be very crucial into what happens with college football, because it's going to get crazy, and it's going to get even more nuts before it starts to calm down a little bit, because people are fighting to get into these conferences. They're fighting to, figure out who's going to be next, where the next domino is going to fall, because things aren't going to stay as they are. Things are going to keep changing.
You think the one thing before we go on to the NFL, I think a lot of the problem with the Pac-12 is the fact that when they're playing, people have already started watching football 12 noon, the 3 o'clock game, the 7 o'clock game. And all of a sudden their games start coming on, around 7 o'clock. And, let's face facts, USC against Arizona, you're going to watch, Georgia against Tennessee. You know what I mean? It's like, they play late. That's one thing that's always their problem, is the fact that they play late on Saturdays, and they were the last team on. And, it was like at the end of the day, and everybody's like, well, I watched 7 games already. Even if you're a college football fanatic, you get to a point where it's like, I'm not staying up till 1 a.m. to watch USC blow out Arizona or Arizona State or, Oregon State. So,
that's I think been one of their biggest problems, is the league has suffered. A lot of the talent that's been out in the West Coast has been coming east.
Yeah.
I mean, the quarterbacks from California, they've been going to Clemson, they've been going to Alabama, they've been going to Georgia. The wide receivers have been going to Ohio State, they've been going to Notre Dame, they've been going to other teams in the SEC. A lot of their talent has been going elsewhere. You think about Bijan Robinson, the running back for Texas. He's from Tucson.
Right.
I mean, these are guys that back in the day would have stayed in Arizona. They would have stayed in California. They would have stayed in Oregon and played for those teams. And they've been coming east because the football teams are better out here, and the power, the paradigm has shifted. So, maybe if they join these conferences, if they get involved, a couple of the teams join the Big Ten like they are, maybe a couple of the teams join the Big 12. Maybe they can, keep some of that talent and, reshape it. But I think, the Washington hasn't been as good as they used to be. I mean, back when in the 90s, Washington was one of the best teams in the country. They were ranked number one. Arizona State had years where they were ranked in the top 5 when they had Jake the Snake Plummer.
I remember him. He was good.
Yeah, and they were playing in the Rose Bowl. Arizona had teams that were ranked in the top 5. Back when the Desert Storm defense, Teddy Bruschi was playing for Arizona, and Tony Bowie and all those great players. So, that's what they need to get back to. They need to do something to keep their talent out west, and maybe the conference realignment is a way they can do that.
Could be. Before we get into the NFL, I don't know if you heard about it, but ESPN is getting rid of Packer and Durham, and I'm going to miss those guys. Two Southern guys, college football fanatics, college sports fanatics, and they're getting rid of their show, and I feel bad about it because for a guy who comes from the north, and I've been down to a few places in the south. I haven't gotten to a lot of the places I want to get to, but just the colloquialism, the picture they painted of like the best barbecue place in town or the best sports pub you have to go to if you go to Alabama and stuff like that. Little stories like that they would get on. I'm going to miss, and I really think ESPN's making a mistake.
Oh, big shocker there.
All right, let's get to the NFL, which of course we talked about it coming on the air. They're trying to figure out a way now, the NFL, what they really care about about justice, are trying to figure out a way to save face for themselves, for the Cleveland Browns, and get out of, again, make it look like they're punishing Deshaun Watson. And right now it's getting to the point of if he's either getting away with some of the biggest crimes of the century, or come out and defend him and say he didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to. We've been talking about this for almost 2 years now, and nothing's happened. I mean, the NFL has their own investigators. They have their own image. They have their own rules. Yet none of these rules seem to apply to Deshaun Watson. I mean, I don't understand. They come out and they have all these causes that the NFL is supporting. The Unity Initiative, the women, the breast cancer awareness, the salute to service. They act like they care about everybody, but these women that have accused Deshaun Watson, apparently they don't care about them, because this guy has been allowed to essentially sit out an entire year, not even have to play because he doesn't want to play for the Texans, yet he still gets to collect his $19 million. And then instead of facing a punishment after that, he now gets $230 million that are fully guaranteed to play or not play for Cleveland. So I think this is a really bad look for the NFL, and whether or not they take a hit for it, I don't know. There hasn't seemed to be anything really that can slow the NFL machine down.
No.
And I don't know whether this will, but I think it's a black eye for the league. And, I don't understand what the hell's taking so long. I mean, either you've had your own investigators go talk to the police. You've had your own investigators go and talk to Deshaun. You've had your own investigators go and evaluate these cases, and yet nothing's been done. And then they have 3 days with their independent arbitrator who's supposed to decide the outcome of this, and yet still nothing has been done. And, I just think it's disgusting that you got Baker Mayfield, who's assaulted no one, who was drafted number 1 overall, who led the Cleveland Browns to their first playoff win since they've been reborn into the NFL. And he's, a pariah who's not even allowed at the facility. But this guy who's got all these cases hanging over him, who said he would never settle them and would take them all the way to court. Well, he already settled 20 of them and paid for them to go away. So that's not really making him look innocent. Whether he's innocent or not, I don't know. I don't really even care at this point, but I just feel like something needs to be done, one way or the other.
When they had to make a decision, they suspended their poster boy and 4-time winning Super Bowl champion quarterback for allegedly deflating footballs. Allegedly deflating football. They had no problem having a 1-2 month investigation and coming up with a 4-game suspension against the defending Super Bowl champions and the league's number one face. But here's a guy who's never won anything. Talented, yes, never won anything. As you said, sat out, has almost 30 women accuse him of physical harassment. No, I've not rape. I never heard rape, but I heard physical harassment. And they
assault.
They cannot figure it out. They can't figure out.
I don't get it. I mean, think back of the running back for Dallas, Zeke Elliott. This woman accused him of assault. He gets suspended for, what was it, 6 games initially? I think it was then retracted down to 4 games. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because it was a few years ago. She later is found to have made the whole thing up, but yet he was suspended, and nothing's happened to Deshaun Watson. I just don't understand why nothing's happened. As you mentioned earlier, if they think that he's innocent, if they think that he hasn't done anything, well, come out and say that and defend the guy. But They haven't done that. They've just kind of sat back, let this all unfold, and have done nothing. And meanwhile, the Houston Texans lost an entire football season because of this, because they couldn't trade the guy
and more,
and he wouldn't play. And now they're here in a year later, and they're stuck with Davis the Neck Mills as their quarterback. So, it's ruined the Texans. And, what's going to happen with the Browns if he sits out all year? I mean, is Jacoby Brissett going to lead the Cleveland Browns to the Super Bowl? I don't think so.
No. It's just think of the coaches whose careers he ruined. Bill O'Brien, Cutcliffe, and now Lovie Smith. They have to come back. And, I mean, the collateral damage that this guy has done, and he gets a no-cut $240 million raise. There's something wrong. There's something wrong, and I'll tell you one thing, like we talked about before coming on the air. Go ahead, Jim Haslam. All these owners are going to try to kick you out of the league when they start paying for the quarterbacks that are worth the money. If he's worth this, what is Pat Mahomes worth? What is Josh Allen worth?
He's destroyed the market for quarterbacks. I mean, given this guy $230 million, who didn't even play last year, who the year before when he did play, although he had good statistics, went 4-12, and now he's getting a guaranteed $230 million. And as you mentioned, what about David Culley, the head coach of the Texans, who, he's been a coach in football since 1978. Finally, for the first time in his entire life, gets a head coaching opportunity with the Texans. I think did a pretty damn good job.
With what he had, yeah.
With the roster he had, and having both hands tied behind his back because of this Deshaun Watson situation, he gets fired. You think he's ever going to get another head coaching job in his life? I don't.
No, he's not. And like I was about to say, Joe Burrow. What's Joe Burrow going to be worth when his contract comes up? Cincinnati will never be able to keep him unless he gives him some kind of a hometown deal, why would he? Why would he? Because you know what? By that time, he may have won them a Super Bowl. Who knows? But, the other thing I wanted to talk about is, we were going to go over some of the worst contracts, and Deshaun Watson's right up there. Another one you talked to me about today, Christian Kirk.
Absolutely ridiculous. I understand the fact that Jacksonville, I've talked about it at length on this show. 10 out of the last 11 years, they've had 10 losses or more. The franchise is a joke, but going out and spending $72 million for 4 years for Christian Kirk's services is just bonkers to me. I mean, this guy What has he done? I mean, what was he in Arizona? Was he the third wide receiver? Was he the fourth wide receiver? I don't really know, but he was mainly a kick return guy who came in and ran some 9 patterns and, did okay. But is this guy worth 80 million bucks? I mean, I really don't think so. And look at what's happened since he signed that deal. I mean, these other wide receivers have just gone, what the hell is going on? I mean, this guy gets $72 million for what? I don't understand how I'm making this when Christian Kirk is getting this. And you know what? I don't really blame these guys. I mean, let's talk about last year, which was by far Christian Kirk's best season. He had 77 catches for 982 yards, 5 touchdowns. Actually, a pretty good year. But you put that up against some of these other guys, and that's nothing. And he's getting this kind of money. You've seen why Tyreek Hill got shipped out to Miami. You see why A.J. Brown is now a Philadelphia Eagle and couldn't remain in Tennessee. These guys wanted, double what Christian Kirk's gotten because they all have produced are better players. So I will never, you'll never be able to explain to me how Christian Kirk is worth $72 million, $18 million a year from one decent season. I just don't get it. I mean, the most yards he ever had in his 4-year career before that was 700. And like I said, 6 touchdowns was his high. So I think that was a horrible contract. I think it really reshaped the wide receiver market. And to be honest, I'm surprised some of these guys haven't gotten more based on what Christian Kirk got.
And then there's another guy right up that alley, Kenny Golladay. I mean, nothing against him, but I mean, when you have Matt Stafford throwing you the ball, you're going to look a little bit better than when Daniel Jones is throwing you the ball.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I think we saw last year what he looks like with Daniel Jones throwing him the football. I mean, this guy's a good player. I mean, he's good wide receiver, but they definitely way overpaid for him. And this is a guy that couldn't even really stay healthy last year. And the Giants, suffered because of it because they've got so much money tied up in that guy. And I didn't really like that move for them. This is a team that's getting younger, and signing Kenny Golladay didn't help them at all last year. Whether or not it will help this year, I don't know.
I don't know. I always think that, wide receivers, I know most of them are divas. They can be they take a lot of blame. They get a lot of credit. They take a lot of blame because they are divas, and usually their plays are huge chunk plays. And when you got Odell Beckham grabbing a one-handed catch and things like that, everybody overblows what they do. But the fact of the matter is, I've seen great quarterbacks make average wide receivers into champions a lot more times than I've seen a great wide receiver make an average quarterback into a champion.
Right. And Kenny Golladay, he got 4 years, $72 million with the New York Giants. I mean, that is a pretty crazy contract. I mean, he's averaging $18 million per year. I think he was guaranteed around $30 million. Or excuse me, I think his total guaranteed money was $40 million, and he got $28 million guaranteed at signing. So, I mean, that's a big chunk of change for a guy who's never won anything in this league.
And then another one they bring up in this article I've been reading, Ezekiel Elliott. I'm going to be on the Dallas Cowboys side with Ezekiel Elliott. I think, yes, he's faded a lot, or seemed to be fading over the last couple of years. He doesn't have those consistent week in, week out games. But I think they had to sign him. I think, at the time with what they were looking at, I think it was either that or have nobody at all.
I agree. I actually don't have as big a problem with this contract as other people do. I mean, he signed a 6-year, $90 million contract. That's a lot. He got a 7.5 signing bonus. 50 million of it was guaranteed. But I mean, look at what Zeke has done. I mean, his rookie season, he ran for 1,600 yards. He played in 15 games, started all 15. He came back in 2017 and, he missed some games. He only played in 10 games and started all 10, but he still ran for almost 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
And then 2018, he came back, started 15 games, ran for 1,400. Came back the following year, started all 16 games, ran for 1,400. Started 15 games in 2020. And then last year, he played in all 17 games. And even though he was hurt down the stretch, he kept going out there and still ran for over 1,000 yards and had 10 touchdowns. So, I mean, as far as bad contracts go, maybe this has hampered the Dallas Cowboys a little bit, giving him $90 million. But as far as a guy producing for one team over a period of time, he's done it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Buckeye fan and he hails from Ohio State. I'm looking at his production over his career. And this guy has produced for the Dallas Cowboys since he's been there. And he takes a lot of heat. And sometimes I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's getting paid. He's now getting paid what he should have gotten paid his first few years when he was blowing off the charts.
Yep.
So I don't have a problem with him. But the other two we've talked about at length on this show, Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey. And, let's go to Michael Thomas first. Here's a guy that looked seemingly, he couldn't do anything wrong in New Orleans. Everything about him, you saw the features that were on Sunday mornings before the games. What a good guy, being in the community and helping out and stuff like that. And man, has his reputation take a pegging the last 2 years. And is it the injuries or did he just lose it?
I don't know. This is a guy that obviously I saw up close and personal, at Ohio State. And this guy, once he first came into the league, was just killing it. And like you said, he could do no wrong. And I was really, really impressed with him. But I can't really defend this guy over the last few years. What the hell was he doing last year when he had ankle surgery right before the season started?
Yeah.
I really don't understand that. He didn't play at all in 2021. In 2020, he only played in 7 games and only started 5. He had 40 catches, but really it's been since 2019. That was the big year when he had 149 catches and set the all-time record, had 1,700 yards. It seemed like since that time and since that day, he's kind of checked out. And
Yeah.
I hate saying that, but it really seemed to me like he's checked out. And he got that 5-year, $96.25 million contract. He got a $20 million signing bonus, averages basically $20 million. He's $60 million guaranteed. And what have the Saints gotten for that? I would have cut this guy a long time ago if I was the Saints, honestly. But they really can't because they've got so much money wrapped into him. Their only hope is that he can come back and give them something this year. But honestly, when you look at their roster, I don't know whether or not he's going to see the field that much, considering their wide receiver core that they already have. Who knows what kind of shape he's in? Who knows how healthy he is? And they've got Jarvis Landry. They've got Chris Olave. They've got Traquan Smith. They've got Marquez Callaway. Who knows how many balls this guy's going to get? And who knows what he's going to look like when he actually gets back out onto the field? What do you think about him?
I don't know if he has. I have a feeling. When you have a guy that has played 7 games in 2 years, my first suspicion is he's lost a desire to play.
Yeah.
These football players. When you don't want to see a football player playing hurt, but and they shouldn't. But they, to a point, all of them do. From the day they go to practice until the end of the season, whenever that is, whether it be in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl, or before that, they're playing with small hurts all year long. And I remember, Bill Parcells once said, when you find yourself standing outside the fray, when you find yourself avoiding contact, it's time for you to hang it up. Maybe he's just lost the will to play football. Maybe, no one could believe when Calvin Johnson retired or Barry Sanders. Sometimes something snaps inside you and you say, I got money, I'm comfortable, I don't want to go through it anymore. And maybe that's something that he's got to come to. Maybe it's something, where he just doesn't want to play anymore. And the other guy, Christian McCaffrey, you've said it many times, man. As much as he's a great story and seems to be a good individual and everything he does, everything right, that contract he's not a big guy. You can't use him the way Carolina does, where he's their leading receiver, he's their leading running back, and they even have him return kicks every once in a while. And getting hit on that many plays when you're his size, it's going to take your toll. And they just signed a contract they're going to have to live with.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk of Christian McCaffrey on the trade block, but I don't see anybody picking up that contract. I mean, that's why you haven't seen a trade, been completed, because nobody wants that contract. And I get it, running back position. It's hard to give these guys deals. I think he, obviously earned some money, but signing him for 4 years, $64 million when they didn't really have anything else solidified wasn't the greatest move for them. And this guy, I think going into 2023, they have a potential out where they can probably cut him. And I think if he doesn't produce this year, I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. I think he'll probably get cut as opposed to being traded, because a lot of these contracts, as you know, are back loaded, and nobody's going to want to pick up the end of this deal, especially if he can't play this year. You saw what happened to this team. They rely so much on him that I think they, me and you've talked about, they've kind of overused him. I mean, in 2019, he had 287 carries.
That's ridiculous.
You put that on top of 116 receptions, which he had. This guy was involved in almost 450 plays where he had the ball in his hands. I mean, anybody is going to break down like that. And look at the last 2 years. 2020, he played in 3 games. Last year, he played in 7. And in those 7, he didn't play in all of them. It's been a disaster for the Panthers.
Well, I remember last year, the first game against the Jets, I think out of the first 11 plays, he carried the ball 10 of them, either catching the ball or running the ball. And, it just you can't keep up that pace, and it's a shame, because he seemed like a decent kid. He had a lot of talent, and it's a shame that he went to the worst possible place he could go to. He needed to go to some place with a one of these offensive geniuses. Perfect place for him would have been freaking up in Green Bay, where he carries the ball a little, catches the ball a little, but it's all about Aaron Rodgers. You know what I mean? That would have been a good pairing for him. But unfortunately, he got sent down to the land that quarterbacking forgot. And he's suffering because of it.
Yeah, 403 touches in 2019. I mean, anybody is going to start to break down after that, especially a guy who carried, had to carry his team on his back. And you're right. He's been affected by the fact that they haven't had a quarterback, since Cam Newton started to break down. They just haven't been able to move on from Cam and replace him. And the guy that went out and decided to go and trade for Sam Darnold, I mean, that guy should never work in the NFL ever again. What a joke. I mean, you saw, we talked about this at length. You watched this guy for 4 years just suck for the New York Jets. And instead of going and drafting somebody, instead of going and getting somebody that's younger and that could potentially improve your team, you go and trade for Samuel Darnold, who looked exactly the same in Carolina as he did in New York.
Yeah, well, we're gonna end up on this one, and we've been talking about it at length, but I'm sick of. You brought it up earlier in the program. Will somebody, free Baker Mayfield, please? If we're talking about giving $40 million to Bradley Beal in the NBA, if we're talking about $40 million from Mike Trout out with the California Angels in Major League Baseball, if we're talking about Deshaun Watson's contract, can't Seattle or somebody pay $19 million for Baker Mayfield and get him out of Cleveland, and let's see what he can do?
Well, the Browns have offered to pay for part of the contract. So pick up the rest, trade him a 5th-round draft pick, and put him out there. I mean, you're not going to go out with Geno Smith
or
as
Drew
your
Lock.
starter. You're not going to go through your season with Drew Lock as your starter. I mean, I get it. You think that they're going to cut him. But at this point, the Browns aren't cutting him just out of spite for these other teams.
Right.
And I think it's ridiculous. I mean, if you're the Carolina Panthers, maybe you think Matt Corral has a chance to be your starter, but he's not going to be ready this year. Sam Darnold's not going to do it for you. So, I mean, the Seahawks or the Panthers, one of them needs to go and grab this guy. And I don't understand all these bad rumors that are swirling about Baker. Everybody loved this guy a year and a half ago. I mean, he was on every goddamn commercial on TV. No one could talk any better about him. And now he's a piece of garbage. I don't see it. And maybe these idiots weren't watching last year and couldn't realize that he wasn't the same player due to injury. But I certainly did.
He's one of these guys, the Colin Cowards, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world don't like him. And they pound him and pound him and pound him and pound him. And like I said, the kid has, if you look at his story, it's one of the best stories out there. He's unrecruited, goes and becomes the Pac-12 or the Big 12's Rookie of the Year, and then he leaves Texas Tech, waits out a year, goes in and becomes the 3-time Big 12 Quarterback of the Year at Oklahoma, including a Heisman Trophy year. Then he comes out and he gets Cleveland to the playoffs for the first time in forever with 11 wins, the first victory since, 1990s, and he's a scumbag. Well, look, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but, I mean, let's face facts. All these quarterbacks have egos. They all have a chip on their shoulder. Not everybody is gosh darn, whatever. A lot of them, they grate their teammates, but when they win, their teammates don't mind it.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that a year ago when they won 11 games, everybody thought that his personality was,
great,
was wonderful, and they loved it, and he had moxie, and now he's an asshole. So I don't get it, but I don't understand what the holdup is. At this point, we need to solve some of these things. I know it gives people like us stuff to talk about, but I'm sick of talking.
I'm sick of talking about it. Really, I really am sick of
talking about Baker. I don't even really care anymore at this point.
I want to start talking about let's look at these conferences and these divisions and who we think are going to be in the running. Take a look at some guys and maybe some free agents that are rolling around there, or maybe getting cut that may be able to help some people. I'd like to get into those kind of things. The worst thing is, as much as they haven't won in so long, the Cleveland Browns have dominated the narrative of the NFL offseason.
They did last year too.
Yeah.
And they sucked. So, they keep being in the news for all the wrong reasons. And there's a lot of hype and not a lot of hope with the Cleveland Browns. I mean, last year they finished third in the AFC North. And it was a disappointing thing. But as me and you have talked about ad nauseum on this show, if they would have just put their backup quarterback in, who has had tons of success in this league, and especially in this offense with Kevin Stefanski calling plays, I think they would have had a lot better year than throwing some guy who's got a torn labrum out there to see what he can do. You'll never explain that to me and make me understand it.
The stars were aligned with Baltimore being as beat up as they were, with Ben Roethlisberger running out of steam. You saw how Cincinnati went from being nobodies to the Super Bowl, jettisoning out of that division.
Yeah, and just having a healthy quarterback out there, they could have won the division if they would have just put the guy that was healthy out there in Case Keenum, who now is gone and is playing for the Bills and backing up Josh Allen because he is a respected backup quarterback. Yeah. That's why you paid for him. That's why you brought him in, and then you have a chance your guy gets hurt and you don't let him play. I'll never understand that.
Not at all. So let's talk about man coverage on Sunday. You got a good guest coming up, a well-known sports writer. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to have Tim May 42 years he worked for the Columbus Dispatch. He's covered the Ohio State Buckeyes since 1984. He's now working for On3.com and Letterman Row, doing recruiting and doing analysis for them. He's got a great article up right now on Letterman Row and On3.com talking about taking an early peek at the Buckeyes versus the Notre Dame season opening showdown. We're going to talk to him on Sunday at 11 a.m. about the Buckeyes, about the Big Ten preview, and also we're going to ask him what he thinks about the USC and UCLA teams potentially joining the Big Ten. So tune in to Man Coverage on Sunday, 11 a.m. We're going to have Tim May, 2017 National Sportswriter of the Year, joining us, and he's going to be on right near the beginning of the show. So everybody tune in.
All right. Everybody have a great holiday weekend. Everybody enjoy the picnics, enjoy the barbecue, stay safe, but enjoy those fireworks. And let's be back next week, and we'll hopefully come up with some subjects. They won't have Deshaun Watson or Baker Mayfield in it.
I don't want to talk about either one of those guys. I don't care what we talk about as long as it's not those two dudes.
That's okay. I agree with you.
All right.
Have a good weekend, my friend. Talk to you next week.
Talk to you, buddy.
Bye.